violence environment, they gon' blame us. You can't fight fire with fire, I know, but at least we can turn the flames on.
Has gotten to a point where we have perverted freedom of speech. There's an ideological bend to all institutions in America at this point. I believe that we should uphold the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and our First Amendment specifically. So people should be free to say what they want to say. The only way good ideas win out is if all ideas are debated. They have to be spoken. This is the foundation for our freedom, is our freedom of speech. Countries all over this globe look to our country as a beacon of light on the hill because we are still allowed to debate openly regardless of your ideological beliefs. It seems as though what is traditionally considered the public platforms of institutions, corporate media, academia, they all have this perversion of safe spaces where ideology that they disagree with is inherently evil and must be stopped. Yet our institutions of media are perverting violence. I would never condone political violence for any reason whatsoever. Maybe hundreds of years ago, violence was a tool in the toolkit of activism. That's not the case today, and this should be an optimistic viewpoint. We should be grateful that we're at a point where ideas are expanded upon rather than using violence. But what do we see? We see the Grammys with an all-time low of viewership pushing the boundaries of free speech, but not in a good sense, not in an ideological, coherent sense. They say that free speech is inherently evil, and legally, you're not allowed to incite violence. What do we call this? Turn up the flames. And as we see, they are turning up the flames in a literal and figurative sense. At what point do we draw the line? I'm not saying that they shouldn't be allowed to speak. I am saying this is teetering on the line of ideology and insight. It seems as though there has been an incitement to violence that has been advocated for, as we've seen billions of dollars of destruction in just the past year alone, let alone the past, our entire past is filled with political conflict. But the idea should be debated. People are called inherently evil because the ideas that are being espoused are at contradiction with somebody's worldview. This is why it's important to have these open avenues of dialogue. Because if we suppress one or the other or any, they don't go away. All it does is push them into the darkness where they grow and fester. But there's also the sense of pushing one ideological bent for whatever reasons. And we see that this is not working. They spent $80 million in ad revenue for the Grammys, and it was particularly unpopular. This is not like when Britney Spears had a bisexual kiss in previous years. That caused a debate among people, but the structure was different then. We still, as a nation, would sit down and watch particular programming in tens of millions, and then we would have dialogue afterwards. We are now seeing a defragmentation of culture and society in our country, and this push to be racy, and the Cardi B performance being an explicit sexual lesbian act on television with which is fine. That is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with the act of being homosexual or lesbian or whatever. This is not the problem. The problem is pushing this as the standard. As we see children books being stop being published for racial stereotypes, we see on the other side the same people who believe these books are wrong are pushing this kind of culture. And then I'm not sure of what order the Grammys were. I didn't watch them, but one preceded or followed the other, and this is what we see. We see political violence being glorified. That was a propagandized version of last year's events. I'm not even going to get into the particulars of, the case of the man who passed away. But if you look into it deep enough, you can tell that this was a propagandized version of the events at hand. And what are the explicit lyrics being pushed? We are a product of our environment, but at least we can turn up the flames. In what rational, logical sense does this is this coherent? I don't agree. I don't believe it is coherent. I believe it is a reach for whatever reasons, whatever the motivations are behind Lil Baby's performance, whether it be economic or ideological or etc. I don't believe that this kind of culture sustains. I am an avid free speech advocate. I am a libertarian, and my philosophy ascertains that we must be able to speak. So I don't disavow their ability to be able to project their ideas. It's the double standard that I'm worried about. Now, I am optimistic because the viewership fell dramatically this year, and they overspent with their ad revenue. So the likelihood of this continuing is low. But on the other side of the optimism is the pessimism, and that is our cultural institutions are failing. The famous saying is culture is upstream from politics, or politics is downstream from culture. And the conversation that's not being had is that riverbed that's underneath of it is our culture. Our culture is disintegrating underneath of us. It's fragmenting, and maybe optimistically it will result in a alternative or parallel economy, and the good ideas will win out. But this is the essential problem with the censorship. We see multiple ideas being suppressed, and as I stated, it doesn't get rid of them. You don't get a safe space. It just projects them somewhere else to be promulgated and debated, and then they're put into an echo chamber. Multiple people watch only certain streams of information because it confirms their bias. I particularly engage in watching videos from all over the spectrum, books included. I love to read. Everybody should look into historical literature, regardless of what your ideology is. You should read what other people are saying. You should watch what other people are saying. How can you know the opposition if you don't, in fact, know what they're thinking? This used to be the ideological bind between all of us, regardless of bipartisan ideologies or outliers or the fringe. We all agreed that even the little guy who nobody agrees with should be allowed to speak. And this is the fundamental structure that needs to remain. But this is not what we see. This is why I was inspired to create any kind of content. I just want to spread ideas. But the idea that we consider incitement illegal, and it's only held to one standard, only one ideology is held to that standard. This woke ideologue propaganda is allowed to run rampant. There is no hateful speech in the eyes of minority or ethnicity, or the individual is infinitely malleable at this point. But the ideology of identitarianism has run rampant among academia and culture and politics. This is why I would like to speak out. I am an avid promoter of being allowed to speak. But this kind of language is being promulgated throughout culture, and it is disintegrating our fundamentals. We need to look at the underlying issue of why we got to this point. And whether you agree or you disagree, I would love to hear your thoughts. The whole idea here is to create a platform or expand on dialogue on an existing platform where we can discuss these things. So if you enjoy the content or you would like to hear more, comment, like, subscribe, share with people. This kind of upstart on this platform and others will have to be organic. It will have to consist of people who agree or disagree engaging. These algorithms will be promoted if you like, share, and subscribe. So I would greatly appreciate any support. Share with your friends, share on your social medias, and help me build this brand so we can continue expanding on ideas. I would love to be some part of the culture of expanding ideas. This is what I'm here for. I'm willing to hear an argument. I'm willing to change my worldview should it be logical and coherent. So by all means, please engage and support.